All right, looks like I have everyone. So really quickly, let's just go around and introduce the panelists. Panelists, feel free to just give your name, title, and then we really want to focus on what tools you're building, and then a really brief overview of what you're actually using those tools for. So Jelly, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Jesseline Punambayan. You can call me Jelly. I'm a product engineer, like a product marketing
VS Code
engineer
on
for Broadcom. So
cloud platform.
for Broadcom, we are developing VS Code extension that is compatible with Eclipse Che, and now we're testing it with GitHub Workspaces. And what I like about these tools is that we are building a one extension with one code base, and you can install it and use it in different platforms. And right now, we are creating an all-in-one mainframe extension package that enables developers to work with ZOS applications. And we're calling that tool Eclipse Cheffer Z. And it is a mainframe development tool that blurs the lines between mainframe and distributed environments. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Sven, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Sven Eftinge. I'm the CEO of Gitpod, and I've been involved with Cloud IDEs for quite some time. Kicked off the Thea project together with Mark, who's also in the panel. Hi, Mark. Now I'm CEO of Gitpod, and Gitpod is basically not so much an online IDE, but more like cloud-based workspaces, development environments, and we use VS Code as a front end.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, my name is Marc Dumais. I work for Ericsson. So like Sven just said, I was part of the Ericsson side of kicking off the Thea project. So like probably the other contributors to that project, the idea for us is to build IDEs from it. In our case, we are interested both in the desktop and the cloud IDEs.
Great, thank you. And Amar.
Yeah, I'm Amar, co-founder and CEO of Coder. We have a Code Server, which is an open source project that puts VS Code in the browser. And we also have a commercial product that has kind of like a developer workspace platform kind of thing.
All right, very cool. Thank you for introducing yourselves. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask some questions. If anyone in attendance has any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or into the Slack channel or the WonderMe. We're going to be watching all of them, and we're happy to add those questions and ask for more details. So Jelly, I'm going to come back to you because you were talking about building a cloud tool for the mainframe. And to me, that's very interesting. So why did you actually decide to build?
So we decided to build Eclipse Cheffer Z because there have been many attempts. I'm going to go back into the past, and there have been many attempts to build tools to modernize mainframe. And some of these modernization attempts, it includes providing modern UI or simplifying UX or minimizing overhead for IT. And we decided to build this Cheffer Z product that we have right now because we have a goal. And that goal is to have this modern or familiar and seamless experience for mainframe developers. And similar to, let's say, you have this Eclipse IDE environment, right? And we wanted to have a centralized instance or a mainframe stack, what we call it, for mainframe tools that could use by mainframe developers. And this time we wanted a lightweight hosted IDE that is accessible via browser.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Amar, I'm curious about Coder as well. There's no shortage of cloud IDEs. What was the inspiration behind deciding to build yours?
Yeah, so originally it was really about, we didn't like waiting on tests, we didn't like waiting on builds, and your local workstation is just physically limited on its resources. And so like now naturally we wanted to develop in a place that just had more resources. That was problem number one. Problem number two is we want to develop in a place that feels like where we're actually deploying the software. So we want to kind of develop in production. And we kind of found ourselves doing these really janky workflows, like you build a binary, you like rsync it to the server and then run it on the server. You have these like kind of weird bridge workflows that sort of arise when you're not using a remote IDE. And yeah, we just wanted to solve that. We just wanted to put the editor exactly where we wanted the code to run. And that's basically the inspiration. As far as code server, what makes it actually special is it's just VS Code. And so you're not actually giving anything up. Like if you're a VS Code user, you're going to be able to use all of the same workflows that you're used to. You're just going to be able to access it through the browser using a remote computer. And that to us was kind of like the key innovation and step forward in cloud IDEs.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess, VS Code, that actually is a good tie into to Sven. You're working with VSX Registry, which, obviously that's the response to a closed marketplace for VS Code. Can you tell us a little bit about why you guys decided to invest in building out the VSX Registry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's necessary if you want to use VS Code extensions or allow users to download and install them, because the Microsoft Marketplace has terms that forbid any non-Visual Studio Code products or Visual Studio products to access it. And since most VS Code extensions are open source and they are, out there on GitHub, I mean, it was reasonable to, have some sort of open marketplace where these extensions can be consumed by any user or adopter of VS Code, not only Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. This is an important part of building, a vibrant community around these tools, as is, building an editor interface like the one that Mark has built for Dia. So Mark, do you want to kind of chime in and tell us what the inspiration was for building Dia?
Yeah, so we go back a few years before Coder, I think. Probably the investigation that led up to Theia happened probably late 2016, done by us and Typefox at the time. So at the time that we looked and found nothing that had all we wanted. We wanted an IDE or IDE framework to build IDEs that were usable remotely and locally. That was FOSS, hopefully with a foundation behind it, something that will level the playing field of all contributions. The Eclipse Foundation fit that bill. We wanted it to be extremely extensible. Using LSP, it would be also multi-language. So there was nothing out there that fit that bill at the time. I think the cloud aspect was maybe missing from almost every solution that was out there. So we created Theia in the end to fulfill that. Since then, there are a few other solutions that appeared that cover the cloud side. And I don't know that there is any that you can out of the box get both a cloud and a desktop IDE out of. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's stick with you, Mark. As you were building Theia, what were some of the the most interesting things that you learned, and then what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, probably it could have happened in another project than Theia. It may be about open source, but one thing that I have learned is that by serving, you gain. So the best way to learn about something is to help others with it. Of course, the source code is often the focus in open source. People want to contribute source code, but there's a lot besides that. And if you invest a little bit to help others, for example, myself, I helped to build build problem that people reported with their Theia-based IDEs, and slowly I became quite good at fixing them, and I became, we could say, a Theia integrator, if you will. And that is a valuable thing to have right now as a skill set that is beneficial for me, my employer, and the project. So I think it's a win-win-win in a case like this to serve the others instead of going in there with the idea of just contributing code.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jelly, what about you? What were some of the lessons that you learned, and what were some of the bigger challenges that you had to overcome?
So the lessons, or maybe some interesting things that we learned about building the tools or our extension, is that the first one that I mentioned is we have this one code base that we can deploy to different platforms. So that's one thing that I really like, and I think is very interesting. And we learned about Docker, so it's interesting for me, at least. It's a new learning. And then there's this ease of using a single dev file, which is our single source of truth for all of the products that we are creating. So I like that. And also the microservice architecture. And with the challenges, I think I would say it's mostly around testing the product itself, because since it's a browser, it's kind of hard to test it.
Mhm.
And of course, a challenge is the usage of Docker containers as well, mainly because it is new. And then we had some issues while doing those Docker setup. We had some issues with the home directory and where to install our products or something like that. And then lastly is the usage of VS Code APIs, because there's a in Eclipse Chess specifically there is a compatibility matrix between the VS Code API, so something that we are facing as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
Amar, how about you with Coder? What were some of the lessons learned, and what were the bigger challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think probably some of the most interesting challenges were actually before Code Server when we had our cloud platform. And I think it really gets at the architectural difference between a cloud IDE and your typical SaaS platform that ends in a .ly. Is your cloud IDE is actually provisioning compute, and that compute your users can really do anything within. And so we just had a lot of issues of like people spinning things up, trying to break out of their containers, trying to mine Bitcoin, trying to DDoS. I mean, this kind of like open and free compute model is like a botnet's wet dream. And so that probably took like a lot of our time really back in the day, just really fighting abuse. And I imagine Gitpod has some really interesting stories on this front too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we
Sven,
do.
you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a challenge for every kind of dev environment, SaaS service, but also CI service, whatnot. Like whenever you have compute in the cloud, the miners are coming. For most of the time, we just we have some measures, of course, like everyone. We've built a systems called Agent Smith that would detect anything like mining or DDoS or whatnot, and block and kill. Probably everyone has that. We now double down on that. We hired the maintainers of the Falco project, who are, Falco is the CNCF project for this kind of detection. And this is just so important that we want to build a very solid solution to that. Because it's just, it's taking a lot of our time and resources, and we want to, better handle that. But I mean, that was no surprise actually. It gets worse and worse. So that's for sure. Maybe you've seen that also recently. There were news, other like the CEO of GitHub recently talked about those issues on Twitter and so on. Mm-hmm. So everyone has this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Mark, I want to come back to you really quickly, because Dia is one of the projects that's seen quite a bit of adoption, and it's been adopted by a lot of other open source projects. How has that gone? Has there been any challenges with that process?
Yeah, I think universally there's something called growing pains that happens in companies and teams and anything that grows, and I think we have not been immune to that. We started a handful of developers, a bit like a startup, and the challenge is to become something a bit more community-based with maybe a lot of people from different companies around it. So I would say we are in this transition. It is going quite well. We have big companies backing us up. We have Red Hat, ARM, Eclipse Source, more recently ST Microelectronics and others, SAP, and on. When I start, I need to name them all. Sorry if I missed a few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sven, I'll come back to you and kind of ask you the same question, but from a different angle. So to make VSX registry viable, obviously you kind of have to herd extension developers to the registry. Has there been any challenge around that?
I mean, yeah, for OpenVSX, of course, like such a registry, it's a marketplace, and it's only successful if you have contributors and you have a community around that. What we did basically is we made it like friction as low as possible. Like it's basically a CLI. It used to be a CLI. You have to create an account. Now we moved the OpenVSX registry to Eclipse, and so there are some additional legal things you need to do. You need to assign certain agreements or sign certain agreements. But yeah, we like the recipe is low friction, and then get adoption through reaching out, and then of course also having a lot of products being based on that. So there's a lot of interest in filling up that registry. So I think that's a basic recipe, but yeah, we are not very focused on the OpenVSX registry. It's more like, yeah, the registry we use, and it's just, I think it's also mostly implemented technically. We have to catch up with the new things that happen there. But it's really an open source project, yeah, so it's quite nice. We have over 1,000 extensions that are now being published. Compared to Microsoft's marketplace, there are, I think, over 25 or so thousand now. But quantity doesn't equal quality always. So the most important 80% is in, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Removing friction is really key to both getting contributors and also consumers of your project. So Amar, I think that's a good lead in for you. What have you done to start to make it easy and frictionless for developers to use Coder?
Yeah, I think the extension marketplace is actually interesting, comparing our story there. So basically for CodeServer, we had that same problem where the Microsoft extension marketplace is super locked down and you can't really use it with a non-Microsoft project. And so we ended up actually writing a crawler that basically scraped GitHub and built all the open source extensions it could find. And through that model, we were able to achieve like 99% parity with the official Microsoft marketplace. And so there's actually not a way for you to directly contribute extensions to the CodeServer marketplace, but we still very rarely get requests. And so that I guess was our solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Jelly, I'll ask you, when it comes to driving adoption of your tool internally with your own developers, have you seen any pushback there? Has that been something that's been easy to do?
So yeah, so in mainframe, our most of our users are using terminal, the 3270 green screen terminals. And yes, I agree with you. There's a lot of pushback, especially when let's say you introduce something that uses Docker or Cloud IDE or with a modern let's say interface or modern UI and stuff like that. There are a lot of, let's say, I'm gonna say cautiousness. I'm gonna say like that, and there are a lot of, let's say, doubts. But what we did there is that internally specifically we asked them to try it out. And we show them how to use it, show them how to adopt it, and teach them how to build something, or at least how to just use it. And it's been internally, it's been adopting good, I'm gonna say, slowly but surely. That's what I'm gonna explain it or describe it.
Mm-hmm. When do you see kind of the turning point? When it's first introduced to becoming someone who's actually a fan of it and maybe even advocating for other developers to use it?
Like a turning. What do you mean by a turning point?
So a shifting point between when they're hesitant to use the tool to change their workflow, and then becoming an adopter of a new workflow.
So what I've noticed is that when they tried to, let's say, try it out, and when they learned how to use it and they learned that it is useful, they started to adopt it. and they
Mhm.
started to, let's say, innovate and start to investigate. And when they did that, they see the benefit of it, and then they start to, let's say, use it every day. It's let's say I'm gonna use it like the 50% they're using it as in their development, but still 50% they're gonna use it. They're gonna use the terminals because it's still, let's say, very useful for them. But yeah, other than that, after those investigation, I'm gonna say that that is the turning point that they see the benefit of it.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess I'll ask you this one last question. I'm curious about, you look at how many major industries that are just essential to uh, basically our global infrastructure runs on uh, COBOL and and on the mainframe still. Do you think that Che4Z is something that you'll see adoption with the broader ecosystem of developers, or do you think they'll actually try it out? Where do you think that that's going? And has even something like the COVID pandemic, where people want to work from
Mm,
home, accelerated that adoption?
yeah, I'm gonna say that a lot of our customers are interested in Cheversey and interested with the concept that we are proposing. So they understand the goal, but as I've described our internal people, they're also cautious because yes, what you said, mainframe is mostly used by financial industries. So with this kind of, let's say, change, they are very cautious about it, but they are willing to try it out. Since they are willing to try it out, for me, that is a positive sign. And hopefully, I believe personally as well, I believe that this cloud-based IDE in general will be adopted in the future and it will be used. And I'm optimistic about it. So
Hmm.
I hope that with customers trying it out, it will spread more. They will advocate as well for this modern mainframe concept.
Hmm. Yeah. Amara, I'll come back to you. Do you think that broader adoption of Coder and cloud IDEs will be seen through the developer ecosystem in years to come?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty inevitable. Right now, it seems to me that the largest challenge is just the IDE support. Like no one wants to change their workflows dramatically. They just want to use the IDE that they're used to, just in the cloud. And probably like the deeper problem here is that IDEs like IntelliJ are built off Java, not really a web technology right now. And so I guess it's just kind of yet to be seen how long it's going to take for them to build out that kind of support. If you look at the
Hmm.
two top issues on the JetBrains issue tracker right now, both of them are related to remote support, and so it's clearly like a massive priority.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So it looks like we've got a question in the Slack chat, and I'll stick with you on this one. So will desktop IDEs exist in 5 to 10 years time? What's your take on that?
It's a lovely question. This is like an ongoing debate, I guess, like desktop versus browser. And it's kind of weird because the IDE is itself becoming a platform kind of like the browser, and
Hmm.
it's really, really highly interactive. I think it's possible that desktop IDEs will stick around. I just think it's very unlikely that the computation is going to be local. I think it's really
Hmm.
just going to be mostly that the UI is local, and maybe you're outside of the browser because you don't want to be staring at an address bar and you don't want, contamination from your browser extensions and whatnot. But for the most part, I would be very surprised if the code is being ran locally in 10 years or even 5.
Hmm. Yeah. Mark, so let me ask you this. One of the things that we've been seeing is a little bit, it almost feels like a standardization of UIs. They're becoming simplified, they're becoming really streamlined. I think Thea has done a good job at kind of being one of the forerunners in that simplified IDE UI that everyone kind of loves. Do you think that that's going to become the norm eventually for pretty much all IDEs, just become really streamlined and really simplified?
I think so. I think this is VS Code leading the pack here. In the old generation of IDEs, you had a lot of wizard, multi-page, next. You need to fill in information. This is a thing of the past now with the VS Code model. You open the configuration file directly and you get assist to fill them out. They has followed, and I think others are as well.
Hmm. Got it. Okay, it looks like we just got a handful of questions for you, Mark, on the Thea side. So, do you find it hard to keep a promise of VS Code extension API compatibility, given how fast VS Code itself moves? It's a good question.
Yes, and it is a challenge. It is a moving target. So every release or so, there's some new APIs on the VS Code side. So it is not just the matter of doing some work and becoming compatible and being for the future. It will be always some work to do. So yeah, there's a challenge there for sure. But it is part of the nature of the Theia project to keep up with that extension API.
Yeah, Sven, I'll pass that question over to you as well because of your involvement with VSX Registry. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the Open VSX Registry, what I'm saying, because that is obviously stable. But for Theia, I mean, I've been working on the Theia project for a long time. That has been a bit of a challenge for sure, like catching up. And the VS Code team is really doing a great job on improving and building great stuff every month. And so I would say Theia is really a great platform if you want to build something on top, like a product and so on. If you are interested in something that is just stock mainstream VS Code, VS Code itself is also a great solution. And so for Gitpod, this is the case. And so just some background. So I'm co-founder of Gitpod as well as Typefox. And Typefox is a company that does consulting and also we created the Theia project, and we help clients to build products based on Theia. And it is more or less like the Eclipse model, right? So Eclipse is a platform that allows you to build products, and there are so many products out there built on Eclipse that really use all the flexibility you have in the API and in the extension model. And Theia is as flexible. You can really, for Arduino, for instance, we built an IDE that looks the same as their old IDE, but it's really Theia. So we could customize it so much that it really looks like the existing IDE for them. And then you had this one button that was basically inflating it to the pro mode where Theia had then debugging mode and so on. So for those, or also ARM is a great example, you want to have power over your product, then you should use Theia. Gitpod is a different case, and so we are currently transitioning from Theia to VS Code in Gitpod, because Gitpod is really about the workspaces. It's really about, running your dev environment, being always ready to code. And we embrace the notion of ephemeral dev environments, which means, your dev environment is not your pet that you give names and you have to care about, but it's just, you can create as many dev environments as you want all the time. And so, it's not about the IDE, and we really just like Coder, think the future is that compute runs somewhere in the cloud or, and you should just use whatever IDE you prefer. And so I'm completely with Amar, the future is there. Popular IDEs, like the mainstream IDEs, they are all following the model of VS Code, building out really great SSH modes where you can have a rich desktop client that connects seamlessly to cloud running workspace, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so that's, that's just wanted to share that because I assume some in the audience also know the background with Typefox and Gitpod and wonder what is the reason for Gitpod to go with VS Code. Gitpod is really not about the IDE. It's solving a mainstream problem, and we want everyone to use whatever you prefer, Theia, VS Code, IntelliJ or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's stick with you. I want to ask you one more question. So do you think that we'll start to see a standardization in APIs or even runtimes and configs?
What API? You mean extension API or?
Yeah, extension APIs.
No, I don't think so. If you standardize them, then they get too abstract, and that means you cannot really leverage the power. Like VS Code's API is relatively abstract, but it is really because they decided to have a process separation. So they have this, this messaging between the extension process and the IDE. And so for that, you need to have a clear boundary, but it's really modeled alongside the abstractions they have within VS Code and not abstractions that would be general to all IDEs on the planet. And, I've recently had a really nice conversation with Eric Gamma, who is the team lead of VS Code. And it's really like he just said the same thing. So they it's not the idea to have a very abstract thing, but really solve problems, like concrete problems.
And what about the runtimes component and the configurations?
You mean describing dev environments as code, things like that?
Exactly.
VS Code has established the dev container format, which is the one that is going to be used by GitHub Codespaces. I'm pretty sure that's going to be kind of, GitHub and Microsoft, they are just too big in the market. And so I think that's going to be a very common format. And for Gitpod, we will probably support it for sure. I'm pretty sure that that's going to happen once there is enough adoption. They don't really yet embrace this idea of ephemeral dev environments. So, Gitpod is a bit ahead with the idea that we pre-build dev environments. The problem with other solutions is they just move the current dev environment into the cloud, and then there is still like one environment you have for your project, and you go back to that and do fetch and you sync just you did before. And with Gitpod, we don't think that's a good idea, because you are creating state and your configuration drifts apart, but instead, like a CI system, Gitpod prepares dev environments all the time, and that needs to be described in the configuration, and the dev container format doesn't allow me to describe that bit, what do I need to execute in order to prepare a dev environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Amar, what's your take on that?
On ephemeral dev environments?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely theoretically the future direction of IDEs and development environments in general. For us, our market right now is mainly the enterprise customer, and the enterprise customer is much less willing to, already going remote is one huge thing for them. And you add on to that, you have ephemeral dev environments that are on and off a bunch of times in a day, and they have all these workspaces for every user. It just becomes a lot to choose. So right now, our approach is really letting the customer kind of decide how much they want to engage with that. They can be as ephemeral or as stateful as they want with Coder.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. Yeah, so does anyone have any more questions that they want to ask the panelists? All right, it looks like that's it. Guys, thank you so much for joining us to talk about some of the lessons that you learned while building your tools. Brian, I believe I'm handing it over to you. So yeah, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jesse, for hosting the panel. And thank you, of course, to our panelists. I think that was a fantastic way to wrap up the sessions today. I think we addressed a lot of the topics that are, high on everybody's list working in this space, things like scalability, things like workspace configuration, and so on. What I like about this space right now, I've been working in developer tools for 20 years. I'm a recovering software developer myself. So from the time I was developing till the time I started working on these projects, a lot has changed, you know, in a very, very short time. But what I like about it is I think it's only the beginning. I think a lot of the problems that need to be solved for greater market penetration aren't solved yet. So that's the reason why we got everybody here today together, and that's why we want to continue the conversation. So thank you to everybody who's building these tools. Thank you to all of you for your questions and your discussion points. Please continue the conversation. We will have further events. We'd love to run similar events to this moving forward. Conversation can continue on Slack. So I see a lot of you have already joined there. Feel free to join at any time. Ask questions of your peers, start conversations, start issues in GitHub or other repositories, and let's keep going. So